Okay, I'm going to try this again. I actually have a timer set, so you might hear an alarm go off during this to try and stop myself from talking too much. Again, the goal of this is to help you with your discussion boards and try and bring the information together. So, first thing I want to do is just preview the 1950s for you and talk a little bit about what is going to happen during this decade. First off, after World War II, everything seemed great for Americans. We were on top of the world. We were the only country that was really untouched by the war in the sense that our factories weren't destroyed. We kept working. We had tons of money. We had millions and millions of dollars of money worth of money in the bank because we couldn't buy anything during the war. Our soldiers were coming home, they were buying houses, they were going to college, everything was looking up for us. The rest of the world wasn't in that situation because the war was fought there. So we had an incredible amount of optimism when this war ended. However, there were some challenges to that optimism. One, the Cold War itself. The Cold War itself is this whole fear that existed within the country about nuclear proliferation, particularly after the Soviet Union exploded their first bomb. That terrified us. And then when China turns communist in 1949 and we start to see China and the Soviet Union sort of as an alliance, which they never were, that adds to our fear. Racial tension within the United States. One of the things that World War II did for us is it helped us to understand that we had to be a more equal society because everybody had to contribute during the war for us to be successful. So, as a result of that, when the war ends, that's why we start to see the start of the true civil rights movement because African Americans are thinking, whoa, wait a second. I'm not okay going back and being a sharecropper down south. I achieved some success up in the northern factories. I achieved some success in the military. I want more. In addition to that, you're going to have the decaying inner cities. One of the things which your discussion board is about is suburbanization. Suburbanization is the move out of the inner cities into the suburbs. What happens is the middle and the upper class leaves the cities, which means you only have the impoverished left in the cities, and the cities start to fall apart, particularly the big cities like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. We have the Red Scare and McCarthyism. I'm not talking much at all about that because you guys read The Crucible. You talked about that. But that whole, again, anti-communist fear that was within the United States. When we talk about the social unrest, a big chunk of that's going to be because of the civil rights. Things like Brown v. Board of Education, 1954. You should have talked about that in civics last year. This is where they banned segregation in public schools. They said that it was unconstitutional. We have Rosa Parks in the Montgomery bus boycott. Again, those are some of the things that are going to add to this social unrest. And of course, the women. Several of you are doing papers dealing with women during this, not this specific time period, but in the 20th century. During World War II, the women were given a lot of opportunity. They went into the factories and they saw, hey, wait a minute, I can do something. But then when the war was over, they were told, oh, wait a minute, those jobs need to go to the men. You need to go home. And you're going to start to see a little unrest there. The women are going to sort of sit a little low key through the 1950s, and you really see the women's movement start to grow after the civil rights movement sort of settles in the 60s. But again, the unrest is there. The unrest is brewing during this time period. I'm going to skip that one just because it won't play this way, and I don't want to waste any time. Okay, so, oops, went too far. We're talking about Dwight D. Eisenhower. So Dwight D. Eisenhower is the American president from 52 to 60. He really brought a lot of sense of stability to our nation. He was the supreme Allied commander during World War II, so he made us feel safe. He made us feel like there was nothing we couldn't overcome. Richard Nixon was his vice president. Of course, Richard Nixon will become far more famous during his own presidency from 1968 to 1973. However, Richard Nixon was sort of the ultimate Cold War warrior, that anti-communist sort of warrior. But they create this time period of goodwill, this idea, this time period where people sort of feel like everything is great. Americans in general were optimistic. Despite of those challenges that existed, we were optimistic during this time period. The adults, who are the people that had fought World War II, they survived the Great Depression as children. They realized, hey, if we can do that, we can do anything. On top of that, when the veterans came back from war, they had created something called the GI Bill. And the GI Bill still is a reason why some people still want to go into the military, because what the GI Bill does is it makes it so that people can go to college. Also makes it easy for people to buy homes and take on other endeavors once they've done military service. Now, what's going to happen is when more Americans start going to college, we're going to shift to a white collar society versus a blue collar society. What that means is we're going to go into more of office jobs, lawyers, doctors, teachers, things like that. And the factories are going to start to fade away. The blue collar jobs start to fade away. We start to become a white collar or a service based society. Because of that, that's going to be one of the big pushes to suburbanization, because people will be making more money. So this becomes a very prosperous time for America. In addition, because so many of the GIs came home from war, the soldiers, that is, many got married pretty much right after they returned, and they start having children, and it's going to become what's known as the baby boom. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what the baby boom is in a couple of slides. And again, Americans are going to buy cars. Because of cars, we're going to be able to move out to the suburbs. I know it sounds weird, but without a car, you really couldn't live in a suburb, because you needed the transportation that existed in the cities to get from place to place. But when you are financially in a position where a family can own a car, or maybe even two cars, now you can leave the city. You can go out into the suburbs, you can buy your home, and you can still get to the stores, you can still get to work, and you can do all that stuff. The car is also going to transform so many other aspects of our life. One, fast food. McDonald's didn't exist until the car existed. Things like even hotel chains like Holiday Inn. We didn't have those until the car existed, because people didn't really travel until the car existed. So our society is going to transform because of that. And there's a picture. Again, this gives that feeling of this is such a wonderful time. Everybody looks happy. Everybody looks successful. This guy here, the one that appears bald, he's not truly bald, is Dwight D. Eisenhower. That's his wife there, Mamie. And then this is Richard Nixon and his wife there. All right. So those are the president and vice president of the United States throughout the 1950s. Oops. Come on. Now, one of the things that you're going to see happen during this time period is the country is going to have plenty of money. We're going to have plenty of money because people are working and people are paying taxes. So the federal government is going to be able to spend more money. They're going to be able to give more aid to people. So Eisenhower is going to extend Social Security benefits. If you remember back when we did the Great Depression, I had said that when Roosevelt created Social Security, the intent was for it to last for a relatively short period of time. The reality is it still exists today, and it's become a vital part of our economy. Part of the reason that happens is because Eisenhower, because of the excess of money that he has, is able to extend it and give benefits to more people. He's able to extend unemployment benefits because we have the money to do that, and very few people are actually applying for unemployment. In addition, they increased the minimum wage for the first time since the Great Depression. They increased housing for low-income people. They increased federal aid for education through things like the GI Bill. All of this is going to help to see America start to grow financially. And again, that booming economy, the idea of the department store, the idea of the mall, all of that becomes symbolic of what America is. And because of these changes, we're going to be able to move into the suburbs. We're going to be able to own our own homes and no longer live in apartments and such. Consumerism. Now, one of the things we have to understand about consumerism, and I want to try and wrap this up in just a couple minutes, and then I'll go into a second lecture, is the children that are born during the baby boom become a whole new potential consumer during this time period. What I mean by that is it's not a coincidence that things like, if we think food, if we think Frosted Flakes with Tony the Tiger as the cartoon symbol, if we think Trix with the Trix bunny as the symbol, if we think Captain Crunch with the cartoon pirate as the symbol, all of those sugary sweet cereals were all created in the 1950s. The reason they all have cartoon characters as their symbol, as the thing that's going to sell them, is because they were marketing to them to the new consumer, which was the children. Because for the first time in American history, children are going to be able to be children. Meaning there's no such thing as child labor at this point. Families have money. They can spend money on their kids. They can buy toys. Hence why Barbie is created, why G.I. Joe is created. Because now people have money to spend on that stuff, and kids are going to be able to be kids for a far longer amount of time. In addition to that, with the move to the suburbs, when people buy homes outside of the cities, you create an environment where it's easy for kids to be kids. You know, they have their backyards, they have the neighborhood pools, or the town pools, I should say, the playgrounds. Everybody has their bikes that they're riding around on the streets and stuff like that. You create this real happy environment. However, I will also say that was sort of a facade. Life wasn't quite that happy. We'll talk more about that at a later date. But again, when you talk about consumerism and you talk about spending, that's what's going to create more spending, because we're going to spend money on children's goods, whether you're talking food, whether you're talking new toys. In addition to that, which adds to all of this, is that whole introduction of television. Yes, television was invented back in the 1930s. It started to be sold in the 1940s. The 1950s is when television explodes. And one of the main things television is used for is for children's shows. Shows like Howdy Doody and stuff like that. And again, it's all about the kids. But the other thing that television does is it gives advertisers another medium to sell their goods. So consumerism, that desire to buy, is going to grow considerably during this time period. And of course, when people are moving out of the cities and into the suburbs, they need to buy more stuff because they have homes now. It's no longer a small apartment. You now have a home that you need to take care of. So people are going to want to buy more things. Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up, and hopefully this will work better than the last one I tried. All right, here we go.